So this is from Instagram. I don't know which account I got it from, which is unfortunate. Somewhere on Instagram. Anyway, about how the future influences us more than the past. The central premise is that most systems, including human consciousness, are organized around reducing surprise and uncertainty. Behavior, perception, emotional states are not purely responses to the past, but actively shaped by the future states the system predicts and imagines. Anticipating repeated past experiences is unconsciously defining future states that mirror it. Body-mind organization versus consciously choosing a future attractor that is different, and then the present will align with what you want. So there's the predictive brain. This is the predictive processing and active inference. It's from Carl Friston that the brain does not passively react to stimuli, but generates predictions of the future and acts to confirm and minimize errors in them. When predictions are unconsciously shaped by the past, we stay in loops. These are called reaction states. Versus conscious creation, which involves updating the predictive model to a desired future and allowing the brain and body to pre-live, like quote-unquote pre-live that future state now. Systems, thinking, and complex systems. Attractor states. This is how behavior is organized around an attractor that are stable states the system tends toward. Robert Fritz on structural tension theory. When a system holds a vivid image of a desired future and a clear sense of the present reality, the tension between the two naturally generates action that resolves the gap. The old attractors, like past traumas and cultural conditioning, dominate the present structure in an unconscious person. But the new future attractor can influence how you act and feel right now, because the system self-organizes around that new future. Physics and retrocausality. In certain interpretations of quantum mechanics, like Aharonov's two-state vector formalism or John Cromer's transactional interpretation, future boundary conditions can influence present quantum states. This doesn't mean time runs backwards, but that the present and the future jointly determine, but the past and future jointly determine the present, and reality emerges from both initial and final conditions. These speculations invite the idea of a beautiful symmetry of influence across time, like the before and after. The physiological experience of the future influence. The nervous system does not treat imagined outcomes as neutral. Visualization studies show that rehearsing a positive future primes the nervous system as if it's already living out that outcome. For example, athletes that imagine successful performance. And conversely, when expecting failure because of the past, predicting it, the body will manifest the psychological state of failure now because of unconsciously living. The body reacts to the future state that's being held, whether that future is unconsciously projected from the past or consciously created by choice. Then you have conscious and unconscious creation. Conscious living is the past leads to predictions, which lead to the future state that's projected, which leads to the present body-mind becoming that state, whether it's anxiety, fear, stagnation. While conscious creation, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be negative. Anyway, it doesn't have to be anxiety. It could be hope. It doesn't have to be fear. It could be, joy. It doesn't have to be stagnation. It could be creativity. Anyway, conscious creation is when the chosen future, the present, leads to a present alignment of the emotion, the posture, the mindset, and this leads to actions, which lead to future actualized thoughts and feelings. So that's when we act from the embodied nervous system state that organizes around a defined future attractor that truly aligns with what I desire, not from inertia, but from the past. I went to a few different meetings. I wanted to practice this in my life. So I went to OA, CODA, ACA, I learned, so I read in ACA literature about how in the game of dissociation, the positions that are the givers of insult and injury, so we might call this the persecutor. There's two types of rescuers. There's the rescuer that on the outside is the victim, like it's so hard for them, and they're covertly they're a victimizer. They're doing like control and all that, and they could be making the other person feel terrible, and they're using it because they always want constant validation and they manipulate, or they could be overtly like the victimizer, like they look so terrible, but they're actually like the covert victim. So they're on the inside, they're really like the victim, like in hiding. So this is delivered by dissociative dosing transactions. The one that you think is the bad guy is the good guy, and it's inside out, it's hiding. And so when we complete this recovery, we actually have this side of the victim, the persecutor, the rescuer, type 1 and 2, the two types we mentioned, and then the sober side of self. And then you have the whole and the healthy, safe, and the sane, sober self. So I started thinking to imagine this healthy and sane and sober, safe, whole self. So, and I went to an OA meeting to think about intimacy, how the overeating, could cause the next day or later brain fog. And then, caffeine might be necessary. So I realized a lot of gentle moments, not chasing company, not trying to force, going inward, brick by brick, grain by grain, and not looking to unavailable people to prove my, or to prove anything or to earn from them because they're not available. So it's like, and then I have to maybe try to get that energy somewhere else. So not even doing it. And also this non-judgmental awareness, which helps me to appreciate myself and life and others so much more, and taking things less personally because of the proactive self. Feeling, it's not using to take what's for me and leave the rest, or to ask for exactly what I need and respect my limits. Additionally, how I needed so much more alone time, quiet time, transition time, slowing down time than I was initiated to. But by focusing on self-care, it's actually starting to become more natural rather than avoiding a healthy presence. And I also realized that like done is better than perfect. Like I don't have to be in a perfect state to do things. Sometimes to do them perfectly. Sometimes I just have to get them done however it goes. And, also like thinking about people, like no one can relate. I can always, I can always like let go and recognize I don't always have to prepare or self-lacerate, like hurt myself so no one else hurts me. And also like the intense people pleasing was exhausting, and I used food in those days as an energy quick fix. So thinking of myself without people pleasing, just having healthier relationships and having good company, I don't have to imagine myself with the food behaviors, for example, and then my life could organize around that. And then some universal needs I learned according to Coda literature was trust, integrity, connection, clarity, recognition, and compassion. So that's ways to self-fill. I went into ACA meeting to learn about integration of the certain traits which are like branches, while the character defects are and ineffective behaviors that result are like the fruit. So this is from their literature that so the traits that we might not be proud of or we might be ashamed of or in denial really have great value if we can embrace them and transform them. And we must attempt through gentleness and patience. Without integration, we might despair over these traits. Help us to change them. These traits represent the false self, which is convinced that it's real, and it disbelieves recovery and the loving nature of a higher power, Hashem, God. And although it used to protect us, it needs to be retired. So we can go into the dark room, close the door, and talk to each trait that's lingering, whether it's people-pleasing, confusing love with pity, judging ourselves harshly, or addictive thinking. We can thank them. We can thank them for the protection and ask them to step back or retire. And some we bid farewell, some we integrate. We make peace with those parts of ourselves that kept us alive as kids, but don't serve a useful purpose now. I got this from a meeting, but it was being read from the literature. Okay, we call this practice walking in the darkness to find the light. Facing our shadow helps us live in the moment and feel hopeful about the future. The shadow here would be considered facing the most disturbing traits and knowing that we survived. Integration means we blend and fade and soften these traits with the help of our higher power. We transform these traits into useful tools for reparenting ourselves. Integration doesn't mean that we revert to relying on these characteristics to avoid feeling or control others. That's considered a relapse or emotional intoxication. because that always involves a return to fear, dishonesty, resentment, a sense of feeling lost, and we revert to one of our childhood roles. With integration, there's honesty, attending ACA meetings, and a sincere desire to change, even as we occasionally find ourselves using one of the traits in our relationships or daily living. For example, if we're fearing authority figures or judging ourselves too harshly, we recognize the trait, step back, take steps to lay it down, and the process can take many attempts, but progress is possible. We must be sincere and committed to our ACA program for integration, to work, and to move toward emotional sobriety. I went to an OA meeting, as I mentioned, and I went to another, and I realized I've been waiting for them to come and fix it, the damage they caused me, the wounds that they inflicted, whoever they are. The men, for example, Binyamin, Adam, Naftali, Shia, my father, Maka, the massage bodywork customers, men I went on online dates with, but they're not coming, or they never came yet. I have to find a way to live beyond victim. To integrate what I was exposed to, the information was too intense. It was traumatizing to be used so intimately by strangers. I also used substances to do so, to help me to let my guard down so they could violate my boundaries and make me violate myself. The deep breathing is like when I'm coming up for air, and how my inner child's arms wrapped around my neck to integrate, like I imagine her holding me like a koala. And one member in the OA program had said anger had become her best friend, a barrier between herself and her devastation and her brokenheartedness. And speaking of anger, I had a talk with my friend Shana Vogel, and we were talking about how to heal from the protective anger, like what we talked about, integrating the trait of anger. So being taken seriously, being seen as authentic and real by others, feeling like I missed out on that golden opportunity to just have a happy, easy life. This is things that she was teaching me, but based on our conversation. Paying attention and listening to the precious inner child, because it does need love and nurture, care, etc., or it screams out. Freedom from guilt and negative thoughts, and it's okay to not get everything right. Being a good son and daughter, etc., is enough. Being that mirror of good reactions and normalcy, getting everything right and getting external approval made me feel safe and accepted. And finally, at the actual ACA meeting, so I was sharing about the literature. So how to do is the honest, open, and willing. So unconditional love and higher self-esteem comes from putting in the time on myself. Reparenting brings life-affirming choices and actions and behaviors that are life-affirming. An unfinished spiritual state can lead to untrusting dysfunction and pride to not get help or think I'm better than others, but emotional spiritual sobriety is declawing the survival traits of performing so that the inner true dying self can be guided into a new life of stability, respect, and health and peace, versus the shame and the pain and the excitement, the self-doubt, the stress, the self-hate as a new normal. So, I'm giving examples: befriending toxic people, forcing myself to rush, a dramatic or insane lifestyle, overcommitting. And the body-stuck memories that trigger safeguarding reactions inappropriately can be healed. Recovery can be unlearning. And finally, sharing uninterrupted without contempt, with trust, the witnessing, the grieving that frees the lost soul from the prison of a dysfunctional childhood. And the updates I was feeling was like the sensations of it, and I'm aware of while it's happening. One, confrontational, authoritarian, aggressive, reactive, defensive people feel less familiar, even when I feel hopeless that I can take care of my inner child by myself. And number two, my inner child holds on to me like a koala, like I mentioned, like around my neck, holding on, guiding me how to go forward and what's okay with me. And I'll stop here, but I wish us all to really integrate what we need to integrate, to heal, to retire the things that we need to retire, and to become a whole, healthy, sane, safe, sober self, and to really get the future, to manifest the present through the future, in the best possible way, with self-care and real intimacy, and to get all of our needs met: trust, integrity, connection, clarity, recognition, and compassion, and to feel we're worthy of love and hard work. All the best. Good night, sweet dreams. Bye. Have a great day tomorrow.